Hello and welcome into the latest edition of ESPN FC Live. Kay Murray, Janusz Michallik, Mark Ogden. A little later on, we'll be hearing from Rodrigo Faez as well. But we're flipping things up today. We're actually starting with PL Express, and then we'll get to some big La Liga topics at the moment. With PL Express, we've got to touch on what's going on at Spurs. We'll be talking about that amazing game between Chelsea and Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester United, all the usual topics, as you know. But let's start with Spurs, Janusz, because last week we said we couldn't really draw too many conclusions from their first defeat of the season, but it's been followed up with another one away at Wolves. And now I think we can start to draw a few conclusions from this one. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think the conclusions that we had ahead of the season, right? Because we never thought that that Spurs, my apologies, were even a possibility to be in the top four. We knew there was a new manager. I think we all liked him. I think they've started very, very quickly. But I think from the beginning, we were talking about what happened if just James Maddison is out of this lineup. And now, as we know it, half the lineup's out the window. And, life comes at you quickly in the Premier League, especially when you concede 2 stoppage time goals as well. But you look at that team and it's nobody can withstand that. Everybody's dealing with that to some degree or other with injuries throughout the season. And it's catching up this time with Spurs.
Okay, so now that we're looking at this, obviously there've been these back-to-back defeats, Mark. Is a top 4 finish the most realistic achievement? And is that definitely something that you think is within their sights this season?
Yeah, I think so. I think Spurs can do top 4. Looking at the way that the league is shaping up right now, and I know it's early days and it's very tight at the top, I do think that you're looking at a top 3 of City, Liverpool and Arsenal. And I imagine that those will pull away at some point. I don't really see anybody challenging that 3. If Tottenham had been lucky with injuries and had Maddison and Van der Ven, Richarlison fit, then you'd think that maybe have an outside chance. But I still think that 4th would have been the best that Tottenham could hope for. But, you've got Tottenham, you've got Villa, Newcastle are inconsistent, Man United, we don't know what they're going to be. And Man United have been terrible, but they're still not far away from top 4. So, there's potential that they could get some momentum. But I do think that Spurs, if they can come through this it is a tough 6 weeks. They've got Man City away in a couple of weeks, and that, again, is a real test. But I think Spurs have definitely got a shout of top 4. And obviously this season, top 5 might be enough for Champions League and the Premier League, because the way that the Champions League is changing next season, so 5th spot is more than likely to get a Champions League position. So I think Spurs are definitely on for that. But yeah, they could finish top 4 quite easily, I think.
Just to end here as well, Janusz, what did you think of those who, after this latest loss, were like, oh, here we go, it's all over now for Spurs, this will be where it all comes undone?
No, but I think, it's going to be a test, obviously. We're going to find out a little bit more about Hinch Postecoglou. In that last game, you could almost see that they were just a little bit lower because of the quality or lack thereof that they've had of the bench in general. An important time because, Mark, you mentioned some of it, Villa home, City away, West Ham home, and Newcastle. So that's not an easy schedule for sure, while you still have a couple key players like Romero and Udogi on suspension, and obviously the injuries. And it'll all depend when those injuries come back, right? Players like James Maddison, that's super important to that team. He alone worries me if I were a Spurs fan. So it's going to be very, very interesting. But I think anybody sane looked ahead and knew that this was going to be a difficult season. It just started in a tremendous way. And there are, as always, unrealistic expectations.
Meanwhile, Mark, you were at that incredible 4-4 draw between Chelsea and Manchester City. First of all, you've got to tell us what it was actually like to be there. And secondly, let's start with the Chelsea outlook on things after a game like that and after the results that they've just had over the past week.
Yeah, listen, it was a great game to be at, a great occasion. I think already it goes down as a Premier League classic, and there's been a few over the years. And we had a bit of a debate on the Gavin Jules show yesterday about whether it was a great game because it was a great game or because a lot of mistakes. But doesn't really matter to me. I think the entertainment value of that game was so high. It was the difficult conditions, and players made mistakes. But that ultimately, mistakes lead to goals, and we want to see goals. We don't want to see lots of boring 0-0 draws or high level of excellence in a 0-0 or 1-0 draw. We want to see excitement and these great players showing their vulnerabilities, and that's what we saw. But in terms of Chelsea kicking on, I think that the first sign of Chelsea actually coming together as a team that I saw was against Tottenham last week when they won 4-1. And yes, they beat 9 men, but I just felt that there was a real spirit in the team and that Pochettino has done what he does. He gets players playing for him, that he gets young players playing for him. He's definitely got something about him, Pochettino, in terms of how he can get a group of players just playing like a band of brothers, and that's what he did last week at Tottenham, and I think again against City. I think when it kicks off on a pitch between players and they start pushing and shoving and it all gets a bit nasty, you want to see the teams, coming together. And Chelsea did that. Chelsea were there for one another. They weren't hiding. They weren't leaving their teammate to it. They were getting stuck in. They were having confrontations. I think that sometimes is a pointer towards a team that's growing a good team spirit. And I think he's definitely got a team on the rise. And when Nkunku comes in and probably replaces Jackson, I think you might see Chelsea kick on again. But it's early days, but I do think you've definitely seen signs that Chelsea are on the right tracks. And Cole Palmer, one of the signs of the season so far.
Absolutely brilliant. He has been. What's your outlook for them now, Janusz?
Yeah, I'm just going to wait for consistency. It's no surprise here when you have this much talent and young players are getting a taste of victory, right? And I think what's important, of course, is that stat that they have done so well against the team from the top four. Because no matter what happens, at the very least, that these players and the manager will say, look, you're at that level. All you need to do is get that consistency and beat the teams that you're supposed to beat, because I'll wait and see. Okay, I remember that game against Chelsea, character coming back. Then, of course, lost at home to Brentford. And then a couple wins. Now you have a draw against Man City, a game that they could have easily lost. I think if you're manager, even if they did lose, you take a lot out of it, at least the things that I've been saying right now. But ultimately, you still have to put in a run together while you recover players like Nkunku and others as well. But when you're a young player, all you care about is that, am I as good, or are we as good as some of the teams that everybody always talks about? So quietly, they're moving up, and I think I like it. But look, for them to get up there, they need to win the games that they should win, and they haven't done that consistently.
And also, there's a lot of talk about them bringing a striker in January. The latest chat as well is John Obi Mel trying to convince Victor Osimhen to join Chelsea. He said that that's where he should go, basically. That's what he wants to see happen. That's on his latest podcast. Is that a factor as well, Mark, that we should be looking at and we need to factor in when it comes to this race at least the race for top four right now, that Chelsea, with the striker, could be an even bigger force to be reckoned with?
Yeah, like I said, Nkunku's going to come in, and he's not an number 9, but he will add goals. But obviously, Ivan Toney's going to be available in January, and I think Chelsea and Arsenal, maybe even Man United, depending on what happens with this new investment, could be in for Ivan Toney. And I think Chelsea have always had success with a proper centre forward. Didier Drogba, Diego Costa. These are the players that to be honest, all teams need a striker. I know we're going to chat about other teams in a minute in terms of the strike and in terms of the potential this season, but without a top striker, you don't win a title. You don't often win anything. So Chelsea are lacking that reliable 20-goal-a-season striker. And I think at some point they've got to stop spending money, because they've spent so much money in the last 3 windows that you'd imagine that they're going to start getting a knock on the door from the FFP people, because there's a lot of money going out and not a lot coming in. Or they brought a little bit in, but still, Chelsea need to balance the books at some point. But yes, they do need a centre forward, but there's not many out there. So Osimhen or Toney would make a massive difference.
I tell you what as well, we've got to just factor this in. Just the other day, that Seru Girassi has been scoring a lot of goals for Stuttgart, and our Archie in Tot asked him pitchside, now he's back from injury and came off the bench and scored, if he was going to be around for the rest of the season, and he pretty much wouldn't be drawn on it. So that's another name to throw into the mix who's been scoring goals already this season. He could be going somewhere, who knows where, but it does look as though he might be on the move in January. Let's talk about who City's biggest title challenges are then right now, and where Arsenal are at the moment with what we've seen from Liverpool. What's your thoughts on the title race, Janusz?
Well, I'm still thinking about Manchester City. I'm going to jump maybe and talk about Liverpool, because they're
challenger though.
I think it's Liverpool, because the potential is unbelievable. They, if I'm Jurgen Klopp, I got to be looking around and say, there's still 4 or 5 key players that are nowhere near their peak, and look where they are right now. Nowhere near. You saw that bench even in the last game, in a game that others have struggled, especially when you go away. You look at Brentford, you look at, teams that play with 3-5 in the back. They kind of know how to play against big teams, and yet it looked easy. And I look at players like Luis Diaz, who obviously, because of the family situation, his head can't be right. But even before that, he wasn't just right. You look at Gakpo, that continues to try to fight for himself and find a position for himself. You look at Darwin Núñez, who, by the way, maybe had the best game as a Liverpool player, even though, scoring wasn't, there's still chances not being put away. But I thought it was just there or thereabout. You look at Jota, who's been absolutely outstanding. I don't even want to I don't even want to mention Mo Salah because he does what he does. That midfield's still not settled. But you look at Van Dijk, who's massive. I mean, this is the form that we've seen when they've challenged. And here we are. The reason why I say that they're the biggest challengers, because they're the only ones that truly know how to challenge Manchester City. That is important. We can talk about Chelsea. Obviously, they're not going to be fighting Manchester United. As bad as they've been, they're there or thereabout, but certainly nowhere near able to challenge Manchester City. But see, even if they were, we'd still be talking about the same thing. And the fact of the matter is that Jurgen Klopp, Liverpool's, a lot of key players still understand what it is recently to run them close and then beat them as well. And I think that, to me, is just as important as anything else. So that's why Liverpool, given what I see right now, and I don't think that this is a Liverpool of old just yet, but I think the potential is unmatched when it comes to the rest of the league in terms of challenging Manchester City.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, obviously, the next game is Man City Liverpool at the Etihad after the international break, and that's massive. It's always a massive game, but I think with it being so tight at the top, I think Liverpool have got a real chance to lay a marker down there and show that they are in the title race this season. I mean, everything that Janusz has mentioned, but also let's not forget that Jurgen Klopp has totally rebuilt his midfield this year. In the last 6 months, he's brought in McAllister, he's brought in Gravenberch, he's brought in Szoboszlai, and it's just transformed the team. They've just got more energy, they're more front foot, and obviously, that Salah's going to score goals, and they've got goals all over the pitch. They are a team that, in any normal season, without a great team like Man City, would be the strong title favourites. And I think they have the edge over Arsenal because Arsenal don't have a reliable goal scorer. You know, Eddie Nketiah and Gabriel Jesus aren't title-winning goal scorers. They're not the sort of strikers that a team needs to win a title. And Arsenal know that. They know what it takes. They've had people like Thierry Henry, they've had Nicolas Anelka, great goal scorers. Gabriel Jesus and Eddie Nketiah not in the same league. And I think they're both very good understudy strikers, second-choice strikers, which is what Gabriel Jesus was at Man City. Nketiah's always been that at Arsenal. So unless they can resolve that situation in January, and I'm not sure they can with the financial restrictions, and Arsenal, I think, are going to struggle to finish in the top two. But if they get a centre forward who can score goals, then that would throw them right back in it if it's still close. But for me, Liverpool, all the way, the strongest title contenders this season.
So Liverpool right now. Let's talk about Manchester United before we have to let you guys go. We're going to put out a fun question, and we'll start with you, actually, Mark. And we're asking for Manchester United, for the club, under which manager since Sir Alex have they made the most improvement?
Well, you're not going to let me have Michael Carrick, are you? Because it was 3 games, but he didn't lose. I think that it's a tough one because Erik ten Hag right now is struggling, and I think you look back at all the managers since Sir Alex Ferguson, none have had a particularly great legacy. But I'm going to say Jose Mourinho, because under Jose, certainly that first 18 months, they looked like a team that was going not somewhere, but they were actually making improvements. They won 2 trophies in Jose's first season. Then they brought in Lukaku, and for that first 6 months of the second season, they looked like they could really challenge. And I think they finished second that year. Then it all, obviously, it happened. Whatever happens in Mourinho happened at United. It just went sour. But I think under Jose, for a good 18 months, it looked like United were making progress. There was no progress under David Moyes. Louis van Gaal's football was so boring that the players wanted to leave. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, no progress at all there, despite a couple of high finishes. But they were never a team that was looking like they had a plan or a tactical blueprint. And Ten Hag was still waiting to see. You know, the second season that he's got right now, he's going backwards. So for me, it's Jose Mourinho, because he did have a good 18 months before it went sour.
What do you think, Janusz?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to push because, look, I think of Manchester United as a team that exists for one reason and one reason only, and that is to win the biggest trophies. And Jose Mourinho has won at least a couple of trophies, and as you've mentioned, whatever you think of that season, they came up close, right? I mean, they were second in the league as well. So we haven't seen that since Ten Hag. It's going to be funny because I think he's making progress in some ways. I've had him sacked at the end of the season, I think, last show anyway. But look where they are. They're a total disaster right now, because they are. I don't care if they're winning or not. I mean, they look second best in just about every game, and yet look where they are on the table. And it's not easy for him, but he's sticking to his plan. So when it's all said and done, we may have to look at Ten Hag, but that's in progress, as Marcus said. Jose Mourinho, obviously a serial winner. And who knows what would have happened if they kept him, because I got a feeling that he would have gotten them even higher than they were. He just does that. We don't know how. We often don't like it. We often don't like him because the way he acts, but we can't take anything away from him in terms of winning.
All right, so let's just talk with you then, Mark, about what the latest chat is. What's the news going around at the moment in Manchester after those back-to-back Premier League wins for United? What's the latest with the Ten Hag situation?
Well, I mean, Ten Hag isn't under any danger right now. I mean, like Janusz says, you look at where they are in the league table, they're not that far off the pace, but you look at performances and they've been, I can't think of a single game this season where United have dominated a game or won comfortably. You know, they just put one past Luton. They won 1-0 at Burnley. They got a last-minute winner at Sheffield United, the promoted team. So 3 promoted teams, and United have really struggled to beat them. So, but they've won the games. Now, they're going to go out of the Champions League, I think, because there's no way they're going to get a result in Galatasaray and against Bayern Munich at home. But because of where they are on the table, and because of there's a situation at the club whereby the ownership issue is still unresolved, and the people above him that would usually be charged with sorting the football out, they're looking over the shoulders. You know, people like John Murtagh, Richard Arnold, they don't know if they've got a job in the next 3 months, because when Jim Ratcliffe comes in with his regime to run the football side of it, they might want to make wholesale changes. So people whose job is to focus on the football and make sure that side of the team is winning have got other things on the mind. So Ten Hag's getting a bit of a free pass right now because of that. You know, ordinarily, you look at those results and those statistics and he'll be under massive pressure. But even the fans, you know, the fans in Manchester, I find the majority are backing Ten Hag. And I think he's third on the list right now, that when then the finger of blame is being pointed, it's directly at the Glazers. And that's a long-term thing because of the way that the fans perceive the way they've run the club. And I mean, you can't say they've not spent money, because they spent a lot of money, but they've wasted it. And the second on the list of the fans is the players. There's so many players at United that have underperformed repeatedly over the season. You've got people like Anthony Martial, who's had 5 coaches going back to 2015. You've had Victor Lindelof, who's been there forever. Marcus Rashford's flatlining right now. Luke Shaw's been there forever. So United fans think the same old players are making the same old failings. And that's why they believe that Ten Hag is getting a bit of a tough draw, because the same players who've let so many managers down are now letting him down. I'm not sure that's 100% right. I think that Ten Hag is the manager. He's got to find a way to make them win. But right now, he is getting a free pass because of what's happening upstairs. And that might continue until we get some resolution there. And we keep saying it's going to be this week or next week, and it never seems to happen. So sooner rather than later, we'll find a new regime taking over the football side of the club. And I think that will then put a lot more pressure on Ten Hag to start getting some results and some performances, but we're not there yet.
Look, the funny part about it is, and that goes for everybody, but in particular for Manchester United too. Look, the season starts right now. International football will be over, which we know that it could be a benefit because you're going to find your rhythm. But also these breaks sometimes help you, sometimes hurt you, right? You can recover players. In the case of Ten Hag, it's a good week because he doesn't have to deal with yet another disappointment, say if they lost the last game, right? So all of a sudden, just a little bit better. Now you get back to things. Look, Rasmus Højlund is going to start scoring goals. I mean, you can see what he's doing in Europe. He's going to do it. He hasn't done it yet. Imagine if he scores just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 goals. Rashford, same thing. We like to focus on these players and what's happening. Is he good enough? Should they sell him? How much should they sell Rashford? You know that there are 3 or 4 games that are coming up that Rashford is going to score 5 goals. It's just going to happen because he does have quality. Luke Shaw is going to get back. Somehow Maguire has been recovered, even though Ten Hag wanted him out. That's the beauty of the Premier League. And right now there's going to be, teams like even Spurs, because they don't play in Europe, or Chelsea, they're going to benefit from that. But there'll be no hiding behind international break or injuries anymore. There's going to be a key moment right now with the festive season coming out, and this is exactly what's going to happen. And you know what's going to happen, right? When it's all said and done, in 3 weeks' time, we're going to have the top 5-6 teams in the top 5-6 spots. That's exactly what's going to happen, bar maybe Villa if they keep this up. But the Newcastles of the world, Chelsea are going to be moving up, because ultimately quality over this long haul is going to take over. It almost always does.
And as always, we are going to be here to talk about it. Thanks so much for being with us, guys, for the latest edition. We'll let you go now. We hope to have you back very, very soon talking about these very same topics. We'll see what the latest is there. Okay, so let's now welcome in Rodrigo Faez, because we've got to talk La Liga. There's a lot to discuss, Rodrigo. Thanks so much for being with us. We're going to talk about Barcelona. We're going to talk about Real Madrid. Let's start with Barcelona, because it's been a bit of a tricky week for Xavi. Obviously, it was a very important win they got against Alaves. It wasn't looking as though they were going to get a win in that first half in this game. But given what happens in the Champions League, given what happened the week before, where it was that late, undeserved win, you could say, against Real Sociedad, the pressure has been on him. Is it unwarranted? Is it fair that he's had this pressure on him?
Hello, Kay. Yeah, I think that his guarantee is, to keep like the Barcelona coach, because he's struggling a lot, not only this season but the before season, just because they win and they got the good results, but at the end of the day, he doesn't really play really well, or at least that well that all the Barca fans need the team to play. That is a tricky one, because if you look back at what he did last season, it's like, okay, Xavi won the La Liga title, and they won Real Madrid, they won Atletico Madrid, they won Real Sociedad, and they did it really well. But at the end of the day, if you are the Barca coach and if you win, but if you don't really play well, you're gonna be always on doubt, and that is what happens this La Liga season, because they don't have the results that they used to have last season. They are maybe struggling a little bit more on defense, because I remember last year they were a wall back in defense, but now they are struggling to get a clean sheet every single week. And when you are destroying that defense that you built last season and you don't have the attacking line that you had last season, the result is that now Barca are struggling a lot. They are not anymore in the first position of the table, and Real Madrid, Girona, they are ahead, and they are not playing that well. And when you are not playing that well, everyone is pointing at you. But I think that he has, the job guaranteed, because it doesn't really make any sense for Laporta to say, okay, I'm going to renew you, but in 1 month time, you're going to be out just because you don't really play well.
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Because it seems really weird to be talking about a Barcelona legend's job safety, particularly in the following season when they've just won La Liga as well. So have there been any murmurings at all of Xavi not being kept in this job, of somebody else coming in to replace him?
I don't know. If you think about that, the only replacement that I could think about, it would be Rafa Marquez, the former Mexican international player. That now he's the coach for Barcelona's reserve team. He's one of the guys that Laporta really relies on a lot, because he came in Barcelona when Laporta took back the president of the Barcelona, and could be one of the main replacements. The bad point of Rafa Marquez is that he doesn't have any experience on any high level team. You could think, okay, Xavi didn't have that experience that you were talking about now. Yeah, sure, but at least he could coach back in Qatar a professional team. And I know that the professional team that he used to coach, Xavi, is not the same level than Barcelona. And I know that, for example, when Guardiola took the first team squad, it didn't have any experience. But he's the only maybe name that could come up now at this point of the season. And I think it's the normal path for Laporta to rely on the guy that is in the second team to say, okay, if finally Xavi could be fired, that is something that I don't really see in the near future, he could be the man. Why not?
The fans still support him though, right, Rodrigo? Because I know we heard whistles at half-time the other day after what we'd seen in that first half at Montjuic against Alaves, but that was just directed overall at the team and what they've been seeing rather than towards the coach, right?
Yeah, I think so. When you are when you are watching any Barca game, you expect something else, something more. Because I remember last year, all the people were like, my God, this Barcelona of Xavi Hernandez looks like Atletico de Madrid of Simeone. It's something similar on the way that they were winning 1-0, 0-1 in any single game. And people were, okay, as long as we win, we are not going to be that bothered that we are now. Because what happens this season is that they are not winning that much, and they are playing the same level that they used to play last year. So that is why those whistles are more focused on Xavi, or even in some players that are not the level that they expected at the beginning of the year. I know that Xavi, every time he speaks on the press in any pre or post game conference, press conference, he, last game against Alaves, he blamed the press and the pressure of the media of that lack of, lack in the team. Like, all the players were so pressed by the media hypes and the media criticism that all the supporters were like, my God, we're not playing well just because of the media. Xavi, are you saying that to to the people think, and they were, a bit annoyed or disappointed by the way Xavi was saying that in that post-game press conference. That is why those whistles, I think they were a little bit more focused on the coach rather than in the team.
Oh, that's interesting. That is an interesting point. Well, we'll keep our eye on it. Obviously, there's a bit of time for him to think and get back to the drawing board with this international break coming, and we'll see how things turn out when Barcelona are back in action when La Liga returns. Let's talk about Real Madrid then. One of the fun topics that we wanted to bring up is that you'll probably remember before the Rayo Vallecano game, Carlo Ancelotti was asked if he was concerned about the lack of goal scoring of Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo. And I think at that point, they'd only scored 3 goals between them in La Liga, while at the same time back then, Jude Bellingham and Joselu had scored 15 goals in La Liga between them, but he were just seeing their goal scoring overall. And so he said, I'm not concerned because by the end of the season, I see Vinny and Rodrigo scoring more goals than Bellingham and Joselu. And at the time, everybody thought, oh my goodness, has he actually seen the figures and seen the stats right now? It feels quite bold of him saying that. Bellingham gets a shoulder injury. We see the Champions League. It seems to be like a little change in mindset here from Vinny and Rodrigo. He's completely supported them all through it. And then came the game against Valencia as well, where they both scored braces. So I just wanted to know what your take was on the whole situation. If you think that Ancelotti's right, if you've been surprised to see this lack of goal scoring from the Brazilian duo, what you've made of it all.
Well, first of all, we get to say that everyone at Real Madrid are surprised by the way Jude Bellingham is scoring in this first part of the season. Everyone is like, oh my God, what signing we did on the summer window transfer. But, if you compare what Jude Bellingham and Joselu did against what they did, the Brazilians did, like Rodrigo and Vinicius, how Real Madrid are struggling with the lack of scoring goals. We remember, if we look back at what Real Madrid did in the last maybe 6, 7, 8 years with Cristiano Ronaldo, with Gareth Bale, and with Karim Benzema, that they're not here anymore. So that is why there's a concern in between Real Madrid team. Like, okay, we need to be moving on Cristiano Ronaldo, Gareth Bale, and Benzema era, and we got to be focusing in what the Brazilians are doing. That is why I think by the end of the season, I think the Vinicius and Rodrigo goes dupla are gonna score more goals than Bellingham and Joselu. First of all, because Jude Bellingham, what he's doing now at this moment is something for me incredible, and I think that we gotta give credit to him, because what is Real Madrid now at the moment is just because Jude Bellingham's goals, and everything depends on what Bellingham do in any game. So that is why now at the present we gotta give credit to Bellingham and Joselu. But the thing is that Joselu, I don't think, first of all, that Jude Bellingham is going to keep scoring like this the whole season. And secondly, Joselu is the only number 9, the only proper number 9 in this Real Madrid squad. And the thing is that his role is not the same than Vinicius or Rodrigo. He's a bench guy that he has to be ready for the last part of any games. So that is why, at the end of the season, Vinicius is going to score more goals, because now he treats the position that he used to have before, and now he's more in the box. And I think Rodrigo, I really rely on Rodrigo, that he needs to score. He has to make that step ahead that everyone is expecting him to have. And I think, after what happened this last weekend, I think they're going to gain a little bit of more self-confidence. And once the season goes by, I think they're going to be up there rather than Bellingham and Joselu.
Oh, there you go. So you agree with Ancelotti in the end. It's been great to talk to you about all of this. And obviously, we'll keep our eye on how things do turn out. Both of those Brazilians have had their contracts extended. Carlo Ancelotti's continued to show his faith in them. So we'll see if they can get those goal scoring numbers up once La Liga returns. Thanks so much for being with us on the latest ESPN FC Live. We'll see you again next time.